Welcome to another episode of the Global Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Carillo. Today we have Stephen Petasky. He is a luxury real estate and short-term rental expert. His company has divisions in the US, Canada, and Italy, focusing on luxury development projects, memorable vacation experiences, and epic restorations of historic estates. Since 2007, they have serviced over 20,000 client vacations. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Charles. Looking forward to it.
A very unique business plan. I love getting into that. But before, give us a little background on yourself professionally and personally before getting involved with short-term rentals in general and what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So my family, my parents had me when they were kind of ripe young age of late teenagers. So not totally planned, but they were high school sweethearts. I just probably came a few years earlier than expected. And so they really had nothing to begin with, obviously starting at a very young age. And it was fun. Of course, you're blissfully unaware at that age of what they're going through financially and, through the whole family process. And they sent my sister a few years later, and then they went and started their own business. And I remember at these kind of farms where we went I remember coming into their the house. I was like 8 years old. So the 88 and the 80s baby. And they had this person at the desk or at the table, and they're signing all his papers. And when they left, I asked what it was. They said, well, that's our banker. And I said, oh, well, what's a banker? And they give you the rundown. And I said, well, what are you doing? They're like, we're taking a second mortgage on our house. I'm like, okay, what's a mortgage? And you start to learn. I'm like, well, what are you using the money for? They're like, well, we're buying a business. And we're going to try to, grow our own thing. It was in the grocery stores, our grocery business. And that's where they kind of had their history and, teenagers in early 20s working their way up through the channels and had an opportunity. So for me, very lucky because I got a chance to watch front row seats, entrepreneurs go through all the hardships and ups and downs and challenges and opportunities that come along with entrepreneurship. And so kind of for my whole life, that's what I was always groomed, destined, programmed. I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, just following along. I didn't know there was any other jobs, in the world. I mean, everyone just starts their own business, right? And of course, as you start to get a little later in life, you start to realize that, oh no, this is pretty unique and pretty special. And so started a couple of small businesses kind of through college days. And then I went into the family business for a number of years, 01 to 07 in the grocery business, which is totally different retail than real estate. But through that journey, I just had a love of travel. My wife and I were married in 05, and we, pregnant with our first in 06. And said, we just want to continue to travel once we have children, and what would be like the right conduit to travel. And then I'll give you a bit more of the story, but ultimately created Luxus. And then we exited the grocery business a few years later and been full steam ahead on trying to build this machine over the last 18 years.
Why did you choose going into real estate and more specifically going into what you're doing now, vacation rentals?
Yeah, so it was, I think it's a good story. I've shared it before, but I think it's good to hear. But because it was a problem we had as a family. So I think when a lot of people start real estate, they're looking for like, what's going to cash flow or what's the best investment. But for us, it was solving a problem that my wife and I had. And that was a problem of continuing to travel the way we were used to while we're still having a family. So obviously, when you're traveling as a couple versus traveling with a baby, things change dramatically. So our challenge was thinking, what does travel look like post first child? And we kind of looked at three options. We said, okay, we can stick with hotels, but babies and hotels and parents, it's just not easy, right? It's babies in the hotel room and you're eating out 3 meals a day and it's expensive. It's just kind of complicated. So then we went down the rental road, and this is like pre-Airbnb days. So it's just Vrbo. And back then, just not totally dissimilar to today. I'll get to the main core of what we're doing now, but inconsistent. And as a new family, it's very difficult to go to something that you're not sure what you're going to get. So you overpack and you overplan and you hope that the home is illustrated correctly in reality versus what you saw online. So we just couldn't deal with the inconsistency and unknown. And then the third option is, of course, buy our own home. And my parents had bought a couple second homes, had a chance to watch them go through that. They were very good at picking homes the right time, selling them at the right time, getting utility out of them in the journey. Personal use, which obviously could have rented as well. They chose not to, but they just used them. And but we didn't have the money to buy our own second home, and it also limited the variety. We wanted to travel to different places. So when we took all that in 06, we said, well, what if we had a portfolio of homes that we owned in multiple destinations around the world, set up exactly the way we would want them set up as a new family? Wouldn't that be the ultimate? Then we get all the boxes checked in one spot. Obviously, we didn't have millions of dollars to do this in order to make financial sense. So we went and syndicated 3 properties. We went and found 16 friends My parents came in, we came in as the first 2 checks, and we brought in 16 friends and family, syndicated $3.5 million in a little mini fund, and we've acquired a condo in Maui, a home in Scottsdale, and a ski summer place in Western Canada. And that was perfect for us because we had variety of a beach, a golf, and a ski summer. And we had the consistency of each of the homes, and we had equity in the homes. And that was the kickoff to Luxus, which then snowballed obviously to many variations of kind of where we are today. But we ended up growing and raising, pretty close to about $100 million of value, 50 properties around the world, serviced those 20,000 vacations you mentioned, and had a really kind of good experience for, call it version 1.0 of Luxus before we transitioned to our new journey. So yeah, it was a fun ride. I'm still humbled that those initial people gave us their money in the early stages because I wasn't sure I was deserving of it. I might have been very passionate about what we were trying to accomplish, but I had nothing to prove that I was good at real estate. But I still thank those people every single day I see them because without that, we would not have what we have today.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Do you have money sitting in the stock market and you're worried about it? Or worse, you have money sitting at the bank, not keeping up with inflation? My name is Charles Carillo, founder and managing partner of Harborside Partners. And since 2006, I've been investing my money and my family's money into income-producing properties. These are real assets, real properties with real addresses that produce real cash flow. At Harborside Partners, we provide passive investors who love real estate with a turnkey investing solution. If you want to put your money to work in real estate but can't find deals, don't have the time to get funding, and the last thing that productive people want to do is manage real estate. We find the deals, we fund the deals, and we manage the tenants, the termites, and the properties. Partner with us at investwithharborside.com. That's investwithharborside.com. Go to investwithharborside.com. If you love real estate, you like the idea of passive income, and believe that income-producing properties will appreciate over time, go to investwithharborside.com. That's investwithharborside.com.
So give us a little background kind of where Luxus is now. And you're saying, 1.0, where are you guys right now at 2.0? Because it seems like there's a number of different divisions. You guys are developing, you're restoring, and you're renting.
Yeah, so we, and kind of for 7-8 years, we had that really big growth spurt, raised a lot of capital. We had over 400 investors, these 50 properties. And then like any entrepreneur, you get a little distracted and think maybe there's other opportunities to make money within the space. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we started developing our own Luxus community so we can build the homes the way we want, specifically for our industry and the short-term rental industry. And so we did a project in Hawaii, a project in Palm Springs, California, and then a restoration project in Italy. It seemed like 3 random places, but we had connections and the right, we believe, the right opportunities and pieces of land to do something pretty special in those 3 markets. So definitely bit off more than we can chew, I would say. It's 3 totally separate spots, 3 totally separate places. And we had, kind of 1 win, 1 middle round, and 1 punch in the throat. And, you live and learn what you become good at. And that took us kind of through the next 7 years. And then that brought us to COVID. And that's when, in addition to other businesses we tried to launch in different variations, COVID was almost a blessing in disguise. And much as it really, really, really was painful during that first 6 months to a year, it paused everything in our business, allowed us to regroup and get hyper-focused on two divisions. So there's really 2 primary companies that represent the Luxus Group now. There's the Luxus Vacation Properties rental model, which I'll get into. And then there's a Luxus Developments model. And so Luxus Developments is based out of New York with my partner there in his office. And then underneath that is the Italy office, which in Siena, Tuscany, which represents the restoration division. And then we have the Luxus Vacation Properties based out of Edmonton, Canada. And we're looking to start an office in Western US. And so through that journey, I was rambling on for a minute, but we got really focused and saying, okay, these development projects are hard. If we can make them bigger, it could be worth the same. As I'm getting a little later in my career, it's like, well, if they're going to take 5 to 7 years anyway, they're going to be very stressful and very challenging. Let's target larger projects. Now we have some experience behind us. And to give the short version, we end up partnering on a great JV partner. We end up finding an amazing piece of land. We had the right landowner, all the right things lined up. And we end up creating 4 Seasons private residences, Las Vegas. So partnering with that brand on a very meaningful project. It's very special. It's going to be over $1 billion sellout. We obviously have partners, capital partners. It's a very significant investment, but we've got the right people on our team and we're surrounded by, and we're going to create something pretty special there. So that development arm kind of, took off and it's got its own new trajectory working with 4 Seasons and some other brands. And then once we kind of get that stabilized, we launched this new Luxus Vacation Properties rental model, which I'll come back to a little bit later, but I'll pause there and let you ask some questions. But the new vacation rental model is pretty special, and it's going to hopefully change the industry and change the way people travel.
How does developing and restoring your own unique properties, while building a brand kind of around some of those properties, those higher end ones, separate your vacation rental business from other competitors in the space where they might just be renovating one property, they might just be renting it out, nothing special, or buying something that's already renovated or already, ready to go, let's say, to the most part, and they're just kind of offering this. How does yours differ from them? How does that make it a more unique opportunity and a unique experience for your clients?
Sure. So when the first version of the development side, kind of 2014 to 2021, we were creating specifically rental products. So when you create a home that's designed exclusively to rent, you design it a bit differently than you would design a traditional single-family residence. You have more master bedrooms that are equal. Like when someone books a house together collectively with 4 couples that want to go down to Palm Springs for a golf trip, how it typically is, someone gets this opulent master bedroom and then there's 3 junior suites and one has a Jack and Jill. So you all pay equally, but who gets the short straw? So we were creating these products that are designed really for the rental industry to take care of, corporate retreats, generational travel, and create this uniform experience for the end user. The development has shifted now. Now the projects we're building, the overlap of the two companies now primarily is my ownership. We actually don't have much overlap in operations. We're not developing for ourselves anymore. We're developing for a different clientele around Four Seasons and kind of branded residential type projects. Still in Tuscany, we still do restorations for families, restorations of kind of ancient ruins and converts them to be luxury private estates. Some of them rent with us after, some of them use them personally. So we kind of provide the full vertical of experience over there. So again, in that scenario, we're developing for rentals. We can create, the one we just completed a couple of years ago, 5 master bedrooms. So it's excellent when you have couples that are all going collectively. No one feels like they got the short end of the stick. And in Tuscany is very differentiated between generally old villas, the master bedroom versus the junior suites. So we have a little different lens on it when you have the ability to have gone through 20,000 vacations and understand what the client wants at the end, to when we can create a product that is going to serve a certain type of clientele, is going to appreciate our option basically, versus maybe someone else on Airbnb or somewhere else.
One of the things I see with these unique properties, which that makes perfect sense about the whole bedroom thing, because traveling with my wife and with couples, I understand exactly how that works. And it's not something you think of, right? If I was going to become a short-term rental investor, right? But as someone in the business, obviously, you're hit with this all the time with people. How do you effectively measure the demand for new property? And maybe it's easier with development or with when you're doing a hotel or a vacation type rental, but for a unique one-off project, restoration type project, how can you, effectively, it's so unique. There's going to be such a niche for it. There's only so few end buyers, like you said, you usually do, or having a rental clientele that can pay thousands of dollars per day. You got to really have to know that, there's that demand there, which is, something. It's much easier if you're say, I'm buying an apartment building or something, or we're going to build an apartment building, and I can say, oh, I see rents here. I can do, you can do all that. So how do you effectively measure that demand for new property, especially in a different country that might not have as much data? You know what I mean? Accessibility, like Italy, for example.
Yeah, it's a good question. We never really look at it, exclusively in the underwriting of financially how it's going to perform cash flow wise. We look at it to say, is there demand for the market at a macro level? So Tuscany, Italy has demand and will always have demand. Tuscany's done a great job of preserving its countryside to make it one of the most special vacation destinations in the world. So then it comes down to, of the thousands of villas you can go find on VRBO to go rent there, how do you stand out as your own? And this is tricky because there's no perfect science to it. But first off, you want a differentiated product, which I explained earlier. You create something that when someone does go there, they're like, whoa, this is a differentiated experience. And others I've seen, I will rebook this, or I will tell my friends, or I'll give them a 5-star rating or whatever it might be. But the second component, particularly in the luxury side, if you can build its own brand and its own following, then people start to become drawn to it. So a lot of them just get lost in a sea of red out there because there's so many, and they all look wonderful from the outside of the pictures. But so we had our first one, Pederi Panico. Pederi is the Italian word for farmhouse. We created a Pederi Panico website, Instagram page, all these various aspects, storybook, like an actual book that kind of explained the whole restoration journey. So when people are actually there, they understood and they kind of felt the journey that we went through to create it. And it adds this level of special flair that others just don't have. And that created, a really, successful rental model within that project. But it took 3 years to do that. Not a lot of people can kind of wait along that long to build that up, but ultimately triggered a really good sale when the time was right to sell it, and triggered a disproportionate return. And we set a record on the sales price in kind of Siena province as a result of the efforts of building that brand for that property. Now, it's hard to build a brand for a $500,000 condo because it just doesn't have the revenues to support the efforts of investing in a full brand. But in your luxury side, you can create its own unique kind of following. And that's what we really worked hard to accomplish.
Yeah, you definitely did it. That website is fantastic. The property is beautiful and it really outlines everything. I mean, it is, like you said, you've achieved that in that brochure that I've already sent to multiple people. So, I mean,
I
it's
appreciate that. Spread the word.
One thing you talked about before, and you mentioned already on the show, and I was reading about you partner with a lot of top hospitality brands, such as Four Seasons, Marriott, Rosewood. How does the process go for partnering with one of those companies? I know we had someone on the show years and years back, and they're telling us about the different kind of cap rate they're getting for regular hotels. Obviously, we're getting into, these are much higher end brands and properties. So how does that process, do you begin kind of the conversation with going to one of these brands? Because as I understand it, they're not owning the property. They're just going to be providing service. Is that how it works? Maybe they, as I understand, like Marriott, they own maybe some of their top properties, or like, you know what I mean? But the rest of it is just a service model. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'll give I'll use Marriott and Four Seasons as two separate examples. So first off, of the process is if you have a very special property, quite often the brands will solicit you because they're like, you guys have a one-of-a-kind asset, particularly a company like Four Seasons where they're looking for front row grade AAA++ type projects. If you can find that particular piece of land, create that vision of the project, they're going to be first in line to kind of solicit you to say, hey, now there's a soliciting process, and that maybe it should be Ritz, and maybe it should be Auberge or Armand or someone else. So the typical thing should be is you use a branding agent. And a branding agent will help prepare. They'll take it out to dozens of different brands, and they'll go, I would say, trade off each other, but negotiate ultimately potentially the best deal for your particular project. So in the case of Mexico, that's what we did. So we're creating a Marriott's project down there, but originally went to, I'm going to say 15 or 20 brands, and they all offer different incentives for it to be. Less well-known brands will pay you more money. Like it's called key money, but basically effectively like a bonus for signing with them. We ultimately chose Marriott because, world's largest hotel. To your point, they don't own anything. I feel like they own, I'm making this up, of their tens of thousands of hotels, they own like 20 or something now. Like they really do use other people's capital. So there's this really nice advantage of, obviously, it's really an art, but picking the right brand for the right project in the right location. And so it's ideally you can use a third party to help you with that. Now we have a specific relationship with certain brands, so we know what they want, and we can help kind of curate a model that works for them. And how it works from that point on, Marriott's a little different than Four Seasons. So Marriott is purely the sales engine. And that's kind of like most brands. They are purely about driving their Marriott Bonvoy and their guests to it. So they actually don't do anything operationally. They hire a third party company. We hire them, but they have to be approved by Marriott to do the operations. So even though they say Marriott on their t-shirt, at the front desk, it's actually a third-party company that ultimately does the management. So because Marriott really got out of the actual servicing of that side. So as the owner of the hotel, our partners, is you got Marriott driving all the business, a third-party operator running it. There's obviously various incentives that each party takes, and then the leftovers come to the hotel owner. And that's what allowed these hotels to scale up, especially Marriott, which has tens of thousands of hotels. Four Seasons a little different. So in the high-end brands, and I can't speak to some of the other high-end brands like, say, Regis and Auberge, but Four Seasons does still run their own service component. They're not willing to give it up to a third party. So when you see a Four Seasons employee, it isn't a third-party operator. It's actually Four Seasons employees trained by them on their payroll because they want to make sure that service experience is uniform across their portfolio globally. I respect that. I think they do. They really have a very high standard. That's why they become, the best hospitality brand in the world, based on that control. So they're less concerned about scaling to 1,000 hotels, and resorts and residential. They just want to have 100 or 200 or 300 of the most perfectly immaculately operated hotels and resorts in the world. So slightly different models, depends on the brand you choose. In some cases, you can self-manage, like a Marriott Courtyard. It might be your employees with Marriott Courtyard on. So Depends on the brand, determines how the operations work, but that's generally how it works between luxury and call it mid-tier brands.
Interesting. Very interesting. One of the things you were circling back on was the vacation rental model, kind of what you guys are working on. So after you have a property, it goes from one of your joint partners and it's developed or it is restored, whatever it might be. Then it comes back, seems like back onto your plate, and you guys are working to handle all of the marketing for it. Is that how that really works in operations?
No, it's a good question. It appears that way, but actually not. So the residential side or the development side, completely separate from the rental. So in certain cases, yes, like in Italy, we do actually take over the management of the rentals from the rental arm versus the development arm, but it's very limited. We're talking a handful of properties. The rental side is a fun story because I'm very, very excited about this. I'm very bullish on what it can be. But, we're trying to solve a very hard problem. And the hard problem is basically combining the benefits and the familiarity, the service, the grand standards of a hotel combined with a vacation rental model. So for illustration purposes, Four Seasons meets Airbnb. So Airbnb and VRBO, their single biggest challenge is in volume. They already control 90% of the market, is that each host around the world delivers a different service experience and a different in-residence experience to their clients. So when they distribute this inventory globally, they actually can't control the experience at the ground level. That's why they incent people through 5-star ratings and superhost status and various things like that. But what we believe wholeheartedly, and I think anyone would attest to it, people desire certainty. Happiness is a function of expectations met. And at the end of the day, consistently, expectations are not met through those platforms because some hosts do a wonderful job. And if you're a host that does a wonderful job, good for you, keep doing a great job. You'll create loyalty for your house. But a lot of hosts aren't very good. They're just not. They don't take care of the linens. They don't take care of the kitchen. They're not responsive when there's an issue with the dishwasher, whatever it may be. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, can we combine the wonderful benefits that come with the certainty of the hotel space, but with the size and capacity that comes with the rental space? And no one's really done this before. There are certain companies out there that have created like a vertical of management with some brand, but we're trying to do a global portfolio where when you go to our Italy property, or Cabo, or Hawaii, or San Diego, Phoenix, Caribbean, wherever, you're going to get the same sleep, the same bathroom setup, the same kitchen setup, and the same electronic setup. So you have familiarity. The homes will vary in size, the condos will vary in size, the furnishings will be different, the art will be different. But if you're going to go there for Thanksgiving, you have everything you need to make a full Thanksgiving meal for your family. And that you're going to have a great night's sleep because it's the same linens and the same pillows and the same duvets in every property. So that's the code we're trying to crack with this new model. And the biggest challenge of it, of course, is convincing homeowners that they have to invest into our brand. But that's what Marriott does. That's what all these people do. You take a Marriott, you can't pick your own linens. You're using Marriott linens. So it's not the hard conversation, but it does require a commitment from the homeowners to say, yes, I believe in this. And I believe this is going to generate me a higher average daily rate and a higher occupancy because people are going to, flock to certainty. And so now we're, coming up on 20 properties. We'll be probably 60, 70 by the end of 2025. Then we want to grow to 400, 500, 600 in 5 to 7 years. And of all varying sizes, so we're going to have from $300-$400 a night to $3,000-$4,000 a night and everything in between. So you can kind of pick your mission based on what the travel is. But it's definitely a fun journey and something we're very excited about because I think if we can do this, and when we do this, clients and guests can travel knowing what they're actually going to get every time without going to a hotel. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. You couldn't have said it any better about, I do a lot of traveling with my wife, and that's one thing that we've kind of unless we're in a certain situation with many people or other couples or something like this where you'd want to stay together, it's like where you go the hotel route because for the certainty and for the hassle-free type experience, which is too bad. But it's true. You can only look at so many reviews and they're just not as accurate as one might hope that they would be.
Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You can go to a Lexus property. You know exactly what you're going to get. And so it's just solve that problem for your family.
One thing here is kind of like we're moving forward here is you guys made it through. You 2007 you got started. You made it through the GFC, right? Global financial crisis. A lot of people didn't. I would imagine the majority of your competitors didn't, especially from what happened with real estate. Put that together with people kind of not spending as much traveling. How did you guys do it? How did you make it through right after you started?
It was a great question. I don't know if you did your research on this, but it's a very good question. I've never been asked this one because it's a good story. When we started in 2007, a similar company started with a similar model in Atlanta. We become good friends over the years. And we both started with this equity model. Within our industry, it was this non-equity kind of club model where you invest into this club, invest. Everyone thought they were investing, but they were actually buying a non-equity share. And these guys had all these properties all around the world. And we were, there's 50 companies in the industry. We were 49 and 50 in terms of size. But our models were based on equities. So people have actual share of the homes, of the real estate via a fund. And second, we had no debt. So what we found out, of course, we're like, why are we losing steam, but why is everyone growing so fast? Well, once the Great Recession happened, it was amazing. People started getting bankrupt, merged up, bought up, circling the drain, refugees everywhere. And we quickly found out that their model is based on either massive debt loads, almost universally, like 80%. And that's what debt was free and plentiful. Or that people didn't actually have ownership. And there was lawsuits galore because people said, you told me I had ownership, I don't have ownership, whatever it may be. So we were able to kind of weather that storm on these two companies. And we both jumped, became the number 1 and 2 in the North America. After about another 4 or 5 years, we added many tens of millions of dollars of equity and growth to the portfolio. And I say within our specific in part of the industry, equity-based, they're still club-based, like exclusive resorts. It's owned by billionaire Steve Case. So he was able to weather the storm purely through massive financial capacity. But we know that they struggled financially, but they just have the financial capacity of a backer like that, which is great. We didn't have that. We had to make it go on not going bankrupt. And because you had no debt, and our operating costs were recovered from the investors, we were able to survive that storm. And the nice thing about that, at the end of the storm, we were one of the few standing, so everyone came to us. And then you were able to grow very, very quickly. So if you can manage, projects with no debt, without the heavy liabilities, it's not easy. In development world, debt is a very important part of a capital stack in order to generate returns. But if you can, limit your leverage in certain situations, get through the storm, you may be the last man standing. And then the clients have nowhere to go but to you. And we've got this phenomenal run from 2011 through 2016 that may not be replicated again, frankly, because of just simply all the right factors working in our favor.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great way. Yeah, it kind of, every time I ask a question or a part of a question like that includes the GFC, the people that made it through, there's always a conservative debt approach. It's just, it gives you the flexibility to go weather all the storms, whatever way it might be going. So,
well, I'll give you the opposite example. COVID happened, and instead of weathering the storm, we liquidated quickly and we lost out. And so because we were a little bit too leveraged. So to give the opposite example, you think I would have learned from version 1.0 of how to do it right, but then you're heavily leveraged. You go into COVID, which triggered what appeared to be this massive decline in desire for real estate. We liquidated, a lot of properties in a short period of time within a year, and then everything doubled and tripled and stuff, a year or two later. So I like to say I was smart, let's call it lucky. Now I've been through both types of cycles, and I definitely want to position ourselves in future projects to be able to manage any storm, have a plan B, C, D, E, F, so that because the other side, if you can make it, generally there's a bright light. You just don't know how long that trough is and how long the storm is going to last, and that's the scary part.
Yeah. Whenever I speak to, let's say, mom and pop real estate investors that have owned property, maybe a small portfolio of their own properties in 10, 15 years, and one of the most things you find in common is that there's little to no debt. You know what I mean? They've paid off that debt, and it's very straightforward. It's very simple. It's not sexy, but it is cash flows, and it doesn't have much risk. And that's what people really get into real estate for the most part is, cash flowing investments.
And I think the thing for you, obviously a great real estate investor following, the hard part is time. And as I'm sure people can imagine, to build a debt-free portfolio that cash flows to your lifestyle, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, takes decades. You can compress that time with debt by leveraging, but then you're taking on risk. So really I'm not saying there's a perfect answer to it. You just know that if anyone's listening to this, is time generally solves everything in real estate. Obviously you do have to make very good decisions, well-informed on the buy side, well-informed on the rental and revenue management side. Like there's obviously plenty of aspects in the early stage, but over time, if you can be around long enough, it gets there. And that's why you see these legacy families that have these massive real estate portfolios that are all debt-free. They didn't build that in a day. It took them many decades, but now their kids and their kids' kids and their kids' kids' kids are going to be good. So is it worth it? I think so.
Yeah, it's not get rich quick, but it's get wealthy, right? So
it's a good wealth. That's a good way to put it. It's get wealthy, exactly.
Before we wrap up here, I have one question because I like asking people. Obviously, you came from an entrepreneurial family, which I was not aware of before this, and you're a lifelong entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are notorious for getting caught up with chasing shiny objects. I mean, how have you maintained your focus throughout decades of building out Luxus and then probably other projects prior to getting involved with Luxus?
Well, I would say up until about 2 years ago, I wasn't very good at it. And I do believe, my journey anyway, is that chasing the objects for the first, call it 12, 14 years was what I needed to figure out what we're actually really good at and where my passions deeply lie. And so I chased a lot of things. So I say these are all the successful things, but I can share all the failures as well in a much longer podcast about where we, buying restaurants, real estate chains, and set up these service businesses, and they failed, in various degrees of failure. But is because I was chasing lots of shiny objects. But I do think that entrepreneurs over their journey do have to try multiple things. It's hard to pick the one thing on day one that's going to be your thing for life. I think this stat something like your seventh idea is actually the idea that you take to the moon. I could probably say it was around my seventh idea or eighth idea, whatever it may be. But now that we are laser focused, I give a lot of credit to my team, and because they helped me get focused, we've helped together to say, okay, we are no more looking at all the other fun stuff. We get so many opportunities now. It is simply because of obviously some of the partnerships we have out there. The opportunities are so plentiful, and I would have been jumping on them like, okay, let's underwrite this and look at that and do this. Now it's like we have two plans. We have two very important businesses that can do very well if our focus remains laser. And I just really good at saying no now. And I was not very good at saying no for a long time. And I think if you're early in your career, you kind of have to say yes to a few things to see what you're good at. As you get a little later on, a little more mature with it, you start to figure out where your skill set really lies. And now I can say no, like no one's business. I'm Dr. No now. Unless it supports these two businesses, then we're out. And that's going to help my team be more successful and our clients and everyone else.
Awesome. Yeah. Focus equals power for sure. Stephen, how can our listeners learn more about you and your business, Luxus?
Yeah, thanks. Probably best website to go to is Luxus VP. So I didn't share, but Luxus is the Latin word for luxury. So not a spin off the car company, but it's actually got its own meaning. So Luxus VP is on luxusvacationproperties.com. And that's the main rental portfolio. So if you're someone who wants to travel, just like you and your wife, Charles, go there, look at properties, book stuff. We'll be growing very quickly, a few properties a month, every month going forward. So lots of options. And that if you're a homeowner of a vacation property that's looking to have a manager rent it, shameless self-plug here, but certainly give us a call to see if we can earn your business to see if it fits our portfolio. So that'd be the main spot. We're on Instagram. I'm on Instagram, Stephen Petasky. And I don't post a lot, frankly. I've been kind of anonymous in the space, but it's a good way to reach out to me on DM and never know if there's a partnership or opportunity to collaborate.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming on today and looking forward to connecting with you here in the near future.
Thanks, man. Thanks for doing this, by the way, for all your listeners. This is great. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hi guys, it's Charles from the Global Investors Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're interested in getting involved with real estate, but you don't know where to begin, set up a free 30-minute strategy call with me at schedulecharles.com. That's schedulecharles.com. Thank you.
Nothing in this episode should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Any investment opportunities mentioned on this podcast are limited to accredited investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure, subscription documentation, and are subject to all applicable laws. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Syndication Superstars, LLC exclusively.